say. Good to see you, sir.
The two finalists are both.
You ready there, Jane? Good morning, Jane. Will you call the roll?
Regent Bartelli. Regent Bailey. Regent Bradley.
Here. Sir.
Regent Drew. Regent Evers.
Here.
Regent Falbo. Regent Higgins.
Here.
Regent Rybar. Here. Regent Menydeep.
Here.
Regent Milner. Here. Regent Pointer. Here. Regent Pruitt.
Here.
Regent Roberts. Regent Smith.
Here.
Regent Tyler.
Here.
Regent Vasquez.
Here.
Regent Walsh. Regent Whitburn.
Here.
The quorum is present.
All right. Thank you, Jane. The minutes of the June 7th and August 24th, 2012 meetings have been distributed. May I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved. Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed. The reports of the Hospital Authority Board and the Wisconsin Technical College System Board have been provided. Any questions or comments on any of those? All right. Well, I know that many of you have been busy this fall visiting your buddy and non-buddy campuses alike. I've heard about the recent Regent visits to UW-Eau Claire, UW-Fox Valley, UW-Green Bay, UW-Madison, Parkside, Platteville-Stout, just to obviously name a few. For my part, I was invited to speak at campus gatherings of faculty and academic staff at UW-La Crosse and UW-River Falls. Among the many topics covered during these visits have been our budget, the flexible degree proposal, economic development, and faculty and staff compensation. Our faculty and staff, of course, do an excellent job. Sometimes there's no substitute, though, for on-site visits and in-person conversations to get a flavor for the good work occurring on our campuses, as well as the challenges that we sometimes confront them. It's good to know that Regents are getting out to learn more about our wonderful UW institutions and to meet with the administrators, faculty, and staff. And I know that's going to continue, and I know people even on the Wednesday before this meeting were out visiting. I think Regent Higgins was at Whitewater, so I think that's a good thing that we're getting around and being very, very visible and very interested in what is going on our respective campuses. I'm pleased to share the news that President Riley, a member of the Board of Directors for the American Council on Education, the most comprehensive national higher education association, has been selected as the sole nominee. So we then assume he's going to get elected for secretary of the board, one of the three officer positions. New officers are going to be elected at the ACE membership at its annual meeting this March in Washington, D.C. Congratulations, Kevin. Only now, how are we going to tell you from Jane Redu?
Easily.
I think we can handle it. Here in the UW system, we now have two chancellor searches underway, one at UW-Eau Claire to find a successor to Chancellor Brian Levin-Stankiewicz, and another at UW-Madison to take over for interim Chancellor David Ward. In both cases, search and screen committees comprised of faculty members, academic staff, administrators, students, and community representatives have been appointed by President Riley to identify a select pool of final candidates. Those final candidates will then be presented for consideration to the Regents Special Committee for each search and to President Riley. After a series of public presentations and personal interviews, President Riley and the Regent Committee will recommend one individual to the board, which must approve the appointments. We plan to have both of those searches completed this spring. At this time, I'll turn it over to President Riley for your report.
Thank you, Brent. Good morning, everybody. Good to see you all on a fall Friday morning. I wanted to start my remarks today by recognizing that today is the first ever National Manufacturing Day. It's sponsored by the Fabricators and Manufacturers Association, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, and the National Association of Manufacturers. National Manufacturing Day is designed to highlight the job opportunities available in the manufacturing field. And opportunities there certainly are. The National Association of Manufacturers reports that there are about 12 million manufacturing jobs nationwide, and about 18 million people have jobs currently related to manufacturing. Regent Tyler is the CEO of a successful manufacturing firm, as many of us know, and recently penned an op-ed piece on the new manufacturing industry. So I wondered, Mark, if you wanted to add anything to the celebration of first ever National Manufacturing Day.
Well, thank you, and happy Manufacturing Day.
Is there a card for that?
There will be next year, I think. No, this is an exciting time for manufacturing. I think the thought that manufacturing is being offshored and something that we don't need to pay attention to. I think that thought has been dispelled, and manufacturing is growing, and actually I think is going to lead the U.S. out of the financial doldrums and poor economy. What's really exciting, our company has the incredible fortune of being at the doorstep of Stout. About half of our management team has a Stout degree, and so that's we're very fortunate. Stout's outreach in working with the manufacturing community and celebrating Manufacturing Day has been incredible. Along with some of the other things they do, at different times of the year, like the STEPS program that introduces girls to engineering, which really is beneficial for us long term. Their Northwest Manufacturing Outreach Center has been very involved. They're very involved in a Gold Collar Careers effort, which encourages careers in manufacturing. So it's an incredible time, and we're certainly excited to be part of it, and excited to have Stout participating in that.
Good. Thank you.
President,
Yes.
it may be an exciting time for manufacturers, but I think Regent Tyler should tell everyone about the notable news that he had last night.
Thank you, Regent Portel. I had to bail out of the dinner last night, which on one hand I was disappointed, but I was excited to get a text that Sarah is starting to push. My daughter gave us a grandson. It's our third grandchild, but so 8 pounds 6 ounces, about 8 o'clock last night. Everything's great.
Well, he timed it right, coming right before National Manufacturing Day, didn't he?
I'm sure that was planned. They thought about that.
Well, with that as a lead-in, I wanted to let you know that I recently joined Dave Bruchart, our Associate Vice President for Economic Development, at a meeting with folks at Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce, WMC, the state's largest business association. So through our discussions there with Kurt Bauer, the president, Jim Morgan, the vice president, we're continuing to work to find new ways to partner with business and industries across the state and ensure that we're aligned in our ability to produce the kinds of skills and workforce that businesses are looking for in Wisconsin in the 21st century. These discussions also enhance our mutual understanding of educational and workforce priorities in the state. Along the same lines, Dave and I also got together recently with Tim Sheehy, the president of the Metropolitan Milwaukee Association of Commerce, where we talked about their strategic plans for industry clusters in southeast Wisconsin in areas such as power, automation, food and beverages, water, IT, and biomedical enterprises. So clearly they're looking for very highly trained talent in these fields, and we need to be cognizant of exactly what skills and knowledge such businesses are looking for as they expand their current operations or seek to develop new business opportunities. So we'll continue to keep these conversations going in an effort to foster more partnerships and to align our capabilities with workforce demands. A word or two on the dreaded sequestration topic at the federal level. At our last meeting, I spoke a bit about federal sequestration, and I'd like to offer a brief update. Congress approved a continuing resolution spending measure that will extend spending through March 27th and increase funding levels for most federal agencies and programs by about 0.6%. That really was a must-pass measure that would allow the federal government to continue operating. Agreement on the continuing resolution, indeed, was a rare moment of bipartisan cooperation in a year in which Congress had not passed a single fiscal year 2013 appropriations bill. But while the Senate and House were anxious to pass this stopgap spending measure before they headed off for the campaign season back home, they decided to leave the biggest fiscal decision until after the November elections, what to do about the fiscal cliff, the large automatic spending reductions, also known as sequestration, and expiring tax cuts that are scheduled to begin going into effect this January. As the nonpartisan Concord Coalition describes it, the sequester was initially intended as a kind of sword of Damocles over the super committee created by the August 2011 deal to raise the debt limit. It was not designed to actually take effect. Rather, it was designed to be so unpalatable that the Democrats and Republicans on the committee would feel forced to agree on a 10-year plan that would reduce projected deficits by $1.2 trillion. Since the super committee failed, indeed, to reach an agreement, however, the required deficit reduction is supposed to take place annually via the sequester cuts. The first year sequester is scheduled to start this January, with reductions evenly divided between defense spending and non-defense spending. Some of the areas where higher education would be affected include the following. While the Pell Grant is protected from the cuts during fiscal year 2013, most other federal financial aid programs, including the Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant and Federal Work Study, would be cut by 7.6% across the board. Funding for the National Science Foundation, the National Institutes of Health, and the National Endowment for the Humanities would sustain a 7.6% across-the-board cut to mandatory spending and an 8.2% cut to discretionary spending. Federal college access programs like TRIO and Gear Up would also see an 8.2% cut. So the UW system will continue to monitor that situation, work with our congressional delegation and our national higher ed associations and partners to highlight the significance that these deep cuts would have for our institutions and our students. These cuts would be a very, very bad blow to American higher education right at the time when we're struggling to help the country put the remainder of the recession effects behind us. So we certainly hope they won't happen. We'll work with our elected officials to try to ensure that they won't, but we're getting closer and closer to that big cliff. On enrollment numbers, as the new academic year gets fully underway, people are always very interested in that topic, what our enrollment numbers are. In fact, we've already seen some news stories about increases in enrollment at some campuses, decreases at others. Let's start with a big picture snapshot, a very quick snapshot of it. Overall, system-wide enrollments are down 0.6%, down 0.6% from last year. In terms of undergraduate enrollments, we have a net loss of 22 students out of 156,580 undergrads in the system. Graduate student numbers are down by 4.3% at 23,600. That's a decrease of 1,067 graduate students from last year. Before we go much further, however, I'd like to emphasize that the data we're going to talk about today are preliminary data. That is, when the final reports on enrollments come out later this year, the numbers could look somewhat different for a variety of reasons. Still, we thought we'd take this early look at enrollments as part of an opportunity for the board to gain a broader understanding of all the forces that come into play to affect these numbers. As mentioned before, there always is a great deal of interest in this. We can't, though, I want to say, look at or interpret these enrollment numbers in isolation. We must also consider outcomes, as we are more and more trying to do in higher education, that is the number of students graduating and the impact that has on our enrollment totals. In fact, if you think about it, as we do a better job of graduating more students more quickly, and that I would argue is the number that matters most, graduating them, as I said, in a shorter period of time and higher numbers, our total enrollments could actually go down by virtue of that. But to give us an overview of the current enrollment numbers, I'm going to turn things over to our Senior VP for Academic and Student Affairs at the system, Mark Nook, and to UW-Madison Provost Paul DeLuca, and I think we'll start with Mark.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to talk a little bit about our enrollments. To begin with, just to give you a brief outline of what we're going to look at, I'm going to spend a little time with our system-wide enrollments. I'm not going to go into any individual campus or show you those numbers, but what's the big picture for the entire system? And in particular, what we're going to see is that the real decline, as the President mentioned, is in our graduate students. It's not in our undergraduates. And part of that difficulty or issues that we have to deal with is that we've had some really good news with our graduation rates and the degrees conferred, but that does have a potential negative impact on our overall enrollments. So good news is hurting us in another way, or has a negative impact. I also want to spend just a little time on our freshman enrollments and an enrollment challenge that we're going to have in terms of recruitment with the number of students coming out of Wisconsin's high schools. Then I'll turn the podium over to my colleague, Provost DeLuca, so that he can give you some insight in particular on what's happening at one of our campuses. I have had discussions with our provosts and our chancellors, and they're ready to answer questions about their individual campuses as well. As I said, these numbers are very preliminary, and they're really starting to just work through what these numbers mean for them and start to set how they're going to handle their enrollments and their enrollment targets for next year. With that, overall, what I want to make sure everyone understands is that this is 10th day data. It's data that we need to have for federal reporting, but it's very preliminary. And we're going to be doing something that I, as a numbers person, a physicist, I don't like to do, and that's compare preliminary data to final data from past years. In other words, we're doing a little bit of an apples and oranges, but it's the only thing we can do right now. It will give us some idea of where we're at this year relative to where we ended up in past years. I also don't like to look just at comparisons from one year to the next, because if last year was a bad year or an extremely good year, that comparison can be affected. So we'll be looking at some 10-year data. What's the trend that's going on? Where are we trending to, as opposed to what's happened in any one given year compared to the last? In this first slide, what you can see is our UW system total enrollments, and they have been growing over the past decade through about 2010. They started to fall off just a little bit in 2011 and 2012. Again, our numbers for this year are preliminary. Total enrollments are down by only 0.6%. However, most of that enrollment decline is in the graduate student population. We're down about 1,089 total students, and 1,067 of those are graduate students. When it comes to trying to predict what your enrollment is and figure out what your enrollment is going to be for the next year, it's important to be able to understand who's going to leave your institution through graduation, through retention, and other reasons that a student might not come back. And as we've pointed out, the graduation rates have been very, very good, and we've had more students go out the back door in a very good way with tassels on the proper side and hoods and graduation rates being up. The other thing that you have to be able to estimate is who's going to come in as freshmen and as transfer students. In times of change, that becomes very difficult. And that's what we've seen this year. There's been a lot of impact. There's a lot of things changing in the economy, a lot of things changing with financial aid that have had impacts on the way our students behave, that have made it very difficult for many of our campuses to really be able to predict very well what's going to happen for the next year. It's really kind of remarkable that we're as close to our numbers as we are, given all the changes that are going on out there. First, sort of the good news. UW degrees conferred. Over the last 10 years, the number of degrees that we've conferred has continued to go up. Pay attention in particular to the blue and the red portions of this slide. Those are indicators of our undergraduate enrollments. The blue are the, not enrollments, degrees conferred. The blue is the number for our associate degrees. Nice increase there from the colleges and a few of our four-year institutions. And the red then is the baccalaureate degrees. Again, really nice progression, nice increases, and hitting the numbers for 80,000 more graduates between 2008 and 2025. This is the really important number. This is the number that will drive our economy, not necessarily our enrollments. Our graduate numbers are also increasing nicely, but there is a concern here. There's an impact then on our enrollments, especially as these climb quicker than they have in the past, and that really happened during this past year. Our graduation numbers were up 1,100 students, and that's a 3.2% increase in the number of students who graduated from our institutions from last year to this year. Our undergraduate number of degrees conferred actually increased by 4.1%. They were up over 1,100 students from the year before and 800 students above our plan. So really in pretty good shape from the number of degrees being conferred in meeting our plans and meeting our commitment to the people of Wisconsin. There is, however, an impact on our enrollments, and while the degrees conferred tell us who's going out the door, the number of freshmen coming in, the number of transfer students coming in tell us what our impacts on our enrollments are. Since many of our transfer students are coming from within the system, I want to spend a little time with our freshman enrollments. And this chart shows you, pay attention to the blue line, that's our total head count. It shows you the number of students that have entered as freshmen over the last 10 years. And it rose fairly quickly through 2007, and note the peak is in 2007, and then drops just slightly and has been fairly consistent since that time. This past year, we've had 7 institutions seeing freshman enrollments go down, and 7 institutions see their freshman enrollments go up. Overall, as we said, the total freshman enrollment's about 159,000 students, and we're down 22 from last year. So it really isn't a big drop. Also, these numbers are preliminary. Those numbers may well go up. We may be above last year's numbers when we get final numbers in. Now, there's some things that impact our freshman enrollments. One of those is the number of Wisconsin high school graduates. Wisconsin graduates are by far the biggest population of our freshman class. Some of our institutions, depending on where they're located within the state geographically, have a large number of Minnesota students, or Illinois students, or Iowa students in the case of Platteville. But all of the states show demographics and the number of students graduating from high school that are very similar to Wisconsin. And as you'll see in this chart, we have good data through about 2010-11. The solid black line shows us the number of high school students graduating. Currently, it's just around 70,000 graduate each year. The blue dashed line is a prediction that was made back in 2008, and it was based on enrollments in Wisconsin's high schools in 2005, and then projected birth rates and things of that sort. It extends out to about 2022, and you can see that right now we're at a low in the number of Wisconsin students graduating from high school. And we're going to stay at that low for the next couple of years, and then we're not going to rebound. We're going to come back slowly. Right? There isn't going to be a bounce back. It's a pretty slow recovery, and we're, even by 2022, some are saying by 2025, we won't be back to that peak of 2008. Now, our freshman class was the largest in 2007, and that's exactly when this was peaking. We've been able to maintain our enrollments even though the number of Wisconsin students is going down because we've brought in more students from other states. When you look at the percentage of Wisconsin students that come to UW institutions, the percentage of the Wisconsin graduates coming to UW institutions, that number has been flat for the last decade, right at 37%. Okay? So the percentage of Wisconsin high school graduates who choose to come to UW is holding level. And what that means is that if you look at the number of Wisconsin students who are in the UW system from 2007 till 2012, it has fallen off, and it has fallen off by exactly the rate and percentage that the number of Wisconsin students coming out of high schools has fallen off. We're still taking the same number. Okay? We have been able to replace those with out-of-state students, okay, to keep our enrollments up. The non-resident student enrollment has climbed, and you can see that here. Much of that increase has happened at institutions that can draw heavily from out of state. UW-Madison has been particularly successful as this. So has UW-Platteville with the Tri-State Initiative that allows them to bring students in from Iowa, Illinois, Minnesota, and Wisconsin in special programs. Whitewater has also been very effective at increasing their out-of-state non-resident student enrollments. And so key institutions have been able to take advantage of this largely because of either their national and international reputation or because of their geography. And all of our institutions have gotten better at turning up their out-of-state and in particular international recruitment efforts, and those two are helping with this picture. This time I'm open for questions, but I'd also like to invite Paul up here, and if you want to ask me questions now, we can do that. We can start, Paul, and then I'll stick around for questions too. Okay.
Okay, Regent Whitburn, go ahead.
Undergraduates down 22.
Yep.
Of our comprehensives, enrollment is down how many of them?
At the comprehensives, 6 of the 11 are down.
Okay. 5 up, 6 down.
Yep.
I should say before we have further discussion or comments, even before these enrollment figures we knew of them, or that we are going to have a discussion, perhaps December, early next year, about the growth agenda. That kind of all of us thought about re-examining. That's been around for some time, and I think we all agree that it's good to, as with any long-term goal, to re-examine where we're at, what numbers we're at, and so that, just so you know, that's going to be looked at a future meeting at some point in time. Mark, so where are we as far as today, as far as the percentage of non-resident students in our system?
I don't have that because we don't have all the non-resident numbers from each of our campuses in yet. The data that we collect in this 10th day numbers is pretty limited. We don't have things like retention rates. We don't also have all the demographics. So I don't have that overall. We have 2 institutions that are above 20% in non-resident enrollment. Most of the others are 10% or less. So overall, we're probably in that 10-12% range. We're certainly not anywhere near 20. But Platteville and Madison are both over 20, and again, Platteville has a special program with this Tri-State initiative that over the last really 5 years has turned up their non-resident enrollments, mostly from Illinois and Iowa students.
But you're telling me that the trend has been in the last 4 or 5 years for that percentage, whatever it might be,
to go up. Yes, and at all of our institutions, they're seeing increases in particular in their international students. As they have a push to more globalize their curriculum and be able to offer global education to their students.
Questions for Mark right now? I'm sure we can come back after hearing from Paul, because I think there probably will be some more questions.
All right, thank you.
Welcome, Paul.
Well, thank you, and I'm really delighted to have the opportunity to talk to you. Of course, having back-to-back physicists who are data-driven can be a bit dry. So what I'm going to try and do is more or less mirror what Mark has said, but elucidate a little bit more clearly, I think, some of the factors, because our enrollments are, of course, competitively driven, and there are factors that affect that are very difficult to control for, but very positive, and I thought I'd spend a few minutes and show you some of those. So let me start with, and some of this you've seen, but not quite in this way. Let me start with the productivity in terms of degrees conferred, and this is for the period going back to 2006-07. What you see is our productivity in terms of the baccalaureate degrees has been systematically going up over time. So we're creeping up very systematically in the production of our baccalaureate degrees. The doctorates, the so-called research doctorates, have actually increased significantly, which for the most part reflects the density of the research programs and the activity in those. But overall, you can see the number of degrees awarded has crossed the 10,000 barrier 2 years ago, and we anticipate numbers approaching 10,200 this year. So the actual output of the degrees has gone up relatively dramatically. More striking, however, is the time to degree, and this has a major effect on enrollment. In the middle, it says all graduates, so you can see, which is the convolution of all the subsets. You can see, in fact, the time to degree has gone down quite significantly since 1996. But most strikingly, the time to degree for Wisconsin residents has gone down strikingly. I firmly believe this is a result of the MIU effort and campus-wide efforts to improve the efficiency and availability of courses and to improve the educational experience in terms terms of advising. The result of this is a systematic decrease in the time to degree. Which, by the way, you're awarding, if you held everything constant, you would award the same number of degrees, but you would do it at a faster pace, which in fact changes the underlying enrollment strategy you use to keep your enrollment where it needs to be. You know, if you look a little bit more granular, this is a very typical plot that we've seen. I've seen this systematically over the last couple of years. And this is a distribution of the time to degree. So you see there's a couple interesting features. If everything worked absolutely perfectly in a quote, four-year degree program, everyone would graduate in 3.7 calendar years. But you see, in fact, some don't. The interesting thing is there's a small group around 2.7. They're graduating 1 year early, which means some people can finish in 3 years, as a matter of fact. The laggards, and that's probably an inappropriate use, at 4.3 and 4.7 really reflect degree programs that simply you cannot crunch them into 4 years. Examples would be engineering would be the most classical example, and certainly in some aspects of education. Simply take that extra semester, that extra year to finish out. Improvements will be slight. Okay, I anticipate no matter how effective we are going forward, without an underlying change in how we do delivery, this will be the pattern you'll see. But the result of this has been a much higher throughput for our programs. This one you have seen before, and these are the other two markers that we're trying to improve. The upper graph shows the percent retention rate year over year, and we're trying to erase any distinction between our diverse populations and the remaining part of the student body. We're almost there on year-over-year retentions. On the graduation rates, we still have time to go. Now, what this means, that doesn't necessarily mean the retention rate's the problem. It's the ultimate graduation rate. You can stay year after year after year, but you do need to graduate, okay? So we need to drive that graduation rate, and that's a not insignificant 14% gap for that population group. And then finally, I show you bachelor's degrees awarded as a function of time and the population that they're being awarded from. In other words, the number of bachelor's degrees and the degrees per enrolled student. So this is an example of the combination of retention rate as well as time to degree. And you can see it's been relatively constant, that is the degrees per enrolled student. It's been relatively constant, albeit creeping up slowly. And if it were perfect, keep in mind, if everything worked perfectly, that would be 0.25. So we're probably never going to get to 0.25, but we're asymptotically approaching it. And then finally, I'll go through the application process. Now so now you have the framework with the output term, the retention year over year term, and now we talk about how do we fill the class to accomplish that. And you can see this graph gives you the application by residency rate as a function of time. And you can see the Wisconsin resident rate of application has been relatively constant, right around 9,000. Non-resident domestic has gone up dramatically over this time period, and non-resident international has gone up dramatically over this time period. Minnesota residents track Wisconsin residents quite closely, so those ratios stay the same. And on this play, now that's the application. These are the admissions, okay. And Wisconsin admission rate has been holding pretty constant, right around 61, 62%. Minnesota about 42%. And notice the sharp perturbation in the non-resident internationals that occurred 2 years ago. There was just simply a dramatic decrease, and we have absolutely no explanation of what precipitated that. It could quite easily have been visa issues, to tell you the truth. Remember, a couple of years ago, there were some very severe visa issues on student visas, and that easily could have driven the non-resident international rate down. Non-resident domestic, pretty constant. So if you roll these all up, I think this graph is pretty intuitively instructive of what's happening. You see the final enrollment rates for the state of Wisconsin, the United States, and the world. So in the case of the state of Wisconsin, there's about 8,400 applications. We admit 68% of those, so almost 70% of those applicants are admitted. That's 5,040, and we yield, that is, those admits that actually enroll, are about 61%, 35-15. So the overall process, admissions times enrollment for Wisconsin residents is about 42%. Okay? So 42% of people who enter the process of applying to Madison wind up at Madison. All right? For the rest of the United States, that's about 15%, and for the world, that's about 12%. So there's about a factor of 4 or 5 between the application to actual enrollment ratios between Wisconsin residents and non-residents and non-residents international. This kind of shows you how we make up the class. Now, the tricky part is we can't control the application rate, so that's an unknown. We can control the admit rate, but we can't control the enrollment rate. So there's only, you can control 2 out of the 4 variables, and you're flying blind on the last 2, which is a bit of a hair loss situation for me. So, and you can see the effect, it's really dramatic. But I make up for it with ties. So in any case, here you have the overall makeup based on our 10th day numbers. And I've broken it out for you in all categories: undergraduate, graduate, professional, special students, and overall. And this is basically the how one puts together the class for this calendar year, the 12-13 class. So you can see, small perturbations anywhere in this process can cause significant heartache and unexpected results. But for the most part, we work very hard at hitting our targets, and I think we do hit the targets quite well. So I'd be happy to, one other point I want to show you. There's a lot of financial aid involved in this process, and I'm not a financial aid expert, but I thought I'd summarize for you just the magnitude of these numbers. You can get a flavor of how much effort and actual resources are put into financial aid for students. Notice that $18.2 million, the bottom number, is in donor-funded aid to undergraduates with need. So, I'm pleased, and I'm sure Mark would be pleased to try and provide any answers we might to any of these questions. And I have a small one-page fact sheet that just summarizes each of these points, the critical points for you. So you'll have those at your fingertips.
Questions for Mark or,
Thank you very much.
or Paul? Thanks. Richard Whitburn.
Paul, really out of pattern, sharp increase in applications from out of state, domestic out of state applications. What do you, in recent years, last few years?
Yep.
Kind of puzzling in some sense if you think about downdraft in the economy, difficult countrywide. As you think about and reflect on that evidence, what do you attribute it to? Is this the brand equity working, or what is it?
Well, I think it's and this is totally speculative, because without a fairly significant amount of research, it'd be actually hard to unfold that. But I think a very reasonable explanation is we offer a simply world-class educational experience over a very large number of fields for a very good value. And we appear, even for out-of-state students, to be a heck of a good value to come to Wisconsin. So that's pretty much probably it, would be my guess.
Other questions? Regent Pruitt.
Mark, I had a question. Even though I'm completely intimidated by you physicists with all your numbers, I do like numbers in my own sort of far below the food chain way. But could you just remind me, and then I'm going to have a question for it, could you remind me sort of about the three campuses that had the greatest increase in enrollment from last year to this year, and then the 3 campuses or colleges or the college system that had the greatest decline? And I'd like to ask a question.
Yeah, the three, in terms of total head count and undergraduate head count, just raw numbers are the same. They're Madison, Whitewater, and Platteville. Those are the three with the largest gains in terms of actual numbers. Those with the largest decreases would be Milwaukee, the colleges, and River Falls. And that would be true both for head count and for freshmen.
Okay.
Excuse me, total head count in undergraduates, not freshmen, undergraduates.
My question is this. And I'm not sure that the correlation is completely direct, but it seems at least, out there a little bit, that I was looking at the percentage of Pell Grant recipients by campus. And there does seem to be some correlation between the percentage of Pell Grant recipients, which is, I think, our best measure for the relative percentage of low and moderate income students at a campus. A correlation between the percentage of Pell Grant recipients and enrollment decline. It's not exact. Superior actually has the highest percent of Pell Grant recipients, but Parkside is number 2. Milwaukee, I believe, is number 4 on that list. In contrast, Madison, for reasons that I'm sure Paul can talk about, is last in terms of the percentage of Pell Grant recipients. And I guess my question really is, and maybe it's a question that I'd like to at least ask for some additional information as we go forward, is, we have lived through a number of budget cycles where we've seen a reduction in state aid and a necessary and I think appropriate decision by the board to increase tuition as a result of that declining state support. But the question I guess I'm wondering about is, are some of these trends, particularly on some of these campuses, related to the fact that low and moderate income students are simply not able to afford to attend those institutions, or are not returning to the campus from a freshman to sophomore year, sophomore to junior year as a result of financial pressures? And I wondered if you could just comment on that. I'd welcome other chancellors' comments as well, and I'd also welcome the possibility that maybe we could get some additional data going forward on that.
I think we are going to have to come back with additional data. With what we have at the moment, it being very preliminary, it'd be difficult to go into that discussion, especially on a system-wide basis. I think the other thing to keep in mind is not just this indicator of social economic class based on Pell, but also first-generation students. And there's a pretty good correlation amongst both of those indicators. But if you look through where the enrollments are up and down throughout our system this year, there's not a good one-to-one correlation. We've got some institutions with a relatively small number of Pell recipients who are also down in their total enrollments. A lot of it has to do, though, at the graduate level. So we kind of have to pull apart the undergraduate and the graduate level numbers to get at this. But we're so early, I think the chancellors and the provosts are really just starting to pull through this data and find what are the nuances and start to set, sort of what they need to do to work for their enrollment, set their enrollment targets for next year. But yeah, we can come back and look at those, because it's just really too early to have teased all of those out. Is there a chancellor or provost who would like to comment on where they're at? Joe?
I think that your question is a good one, and it's very complicated. And the trend is probably due to society's uncomfort with, the high tuition, high aid model. And you see this really dramatically at private institutions. You read about these tuitions going way, way up. I mean, our tuitions, as you well know, have risen because of the cuts in our appropriation. But what's happening at private schools is they want to get more aid money to redistribute to the people on the lower end of the socioeconomic scale. And I think we're at a point now where people are just very uncomfortable with that trend. And certainly we have not really gotten into that very extensively. I know at Madison, the part of the initiative for undergraduates is using some of that extra money for financial aid, as you had in the slide. But that would seem to be, the sort of hard reality of that is there are lots of people who go to our campuses who could probably afford to pay more, but we don't charge them that. And in doing that, we don't derive the aid money that we can then give to the people who need it the most. And the Pell Grant is kind of shocking when you follow that it takes, I think, billions of dollars in increase in the budget, and the student gets maybe, I don't know, $300 more. So it's a big issue, and you know, so I just felt compelled to add that into the mix. I mean, at La Crosse, and I know at other campuses, we certainly have the full range of people in terms of ability to pay. And I always sort of joke that if I had children, they should probably pay quite a bit. And I know other people who might be a single parent that we'd like to not have pay so much. But that's a real financial aid policy question. And it's one that, as the attention has focused on just the rising cost, people have said, let's tamp that down. And when I hear that, I get a little worried because it's very simplistic when you just look at the sticker price. Does that help that?
This is very subtle as far as I'm able to tell. For example, we are careful in our admission policy for the state, for example, to make sure that we admit throughout the state and from all categories, so that we definitely have serious effort on first-time attendees coming from impoverished areas. But unless they fill out a FAFSA form, they're not going to get any financial aid, independent of how they come to us. And if you look at the rate at which they fill out the FAFSA form normalized to the economic index of the counties they're from, they don't fill them out anyway. They're simply paying the bill. It's amazing.
Building on this complication off what the Regent Pruitt was asking, Mark, it might, as we come back and do some more analysis, it might be interesting, it occurs to me, to look at the rate at which Pell recipients are graduating.
Absolutely.
How many graduate in 4, how many graduate in 5, how many graduate in 6 versus non-Pell students, to see if there are patterns there that would inform your question, Regent.
And that is an indicator that we can track very carefully. We're just not at a place that we can look at that for this year yet. We also follow that in our retention rates as well. The point you're raising is one of the things that's really sort of worrisome about sequestration, because it could have a big, major impact on this. While sequestration won't hurt current Pell recipients, it could impact future Pell recipients. It'll certainly impact our TRIO programs, which are the programs that most support the low-income students, the first-generation students, the underrepresented minority students, those students who we have traditionally had the most trouble keeping engaged in higher education, not just within this system, but within the country. So if sequestration actually occurs, we could see a significant impact on our enrollments and on our retention and graduation rates because of those losses of support for those at-risk students. It'd be big.
Yes, sir.
Mark, as you're looking at all this data, and particularly with the high schools and what's happening there in terms of their enrollments and graduations, what are we doing about monitoring the presence of students of color at those levels, and what are we gleaming from that information about our own future enrollments? And if it's one population group that we have to be looking for in the future as far as our enrollments, are we being proactive in working with the schools? Are we basically being passive and waiting for them to hopefully graduate in sufficient numbers? What can you tell us about all of that?
Well, what we do know about the demographics of our high school graduating numbers, students, is that the proportion of the Wisconsin graduates that are white is decreasing, okay, the proportion. The proportion of Hispanic students is increasing most rapidly. The African American student population is increasing slightly, slowly. The Native American population is relatively consistent as a percentage of the number of high school graduates. So this Hispanic population in particular, many states have identified as a population of opportunity. It certainly is a population in our state that we need to pay attention to. When you look at the college going rates of these different segments, then where we really have our biggest concern is with African American males. They are not moving into higher education, whether that's at the tech colleges or at the four-year schools, at anything like the rates of their white male counterparts or their African American female counterparts. And when you look at sort of percentage of the population within one of these sectors that's increasing their going rates, the single biggest increase is in African American females. They're coming to colleges as a percentage of their population. So we have to pay attention to these very, very carefully, and many of our institutions have really turned up their recruitment efforts amongst the Hispanic and African American populations and Native American populations within the state, and reaching out to neighboring states, in particular the Minneapolis-St. Paul market that we're very near here, the Chicago market, and with some of the changes that are going on in the California system in particular with their tuition rates and things, turning to an LA and some of the other large metropolitan areas in California, is a little bit easier to recruit now than it was in the past, because our tuitions are much more competitive even out of state than they were a few years ago.
Mark, it looks from what the graph showed that we've got some trends over the last 3 or 4 years. Wisconsin freshmen down, non-resident freshmen up, enrollments overall kind of steady, degree holders, or those graduating hopefully a little up. Have you looked at the next 4 or 5 years and done forecast estimates on that? And I'm not saying we have to get into that all today, but obviously there's some trend here, and if that trend is going to continue, this board and this university system has to look at what we're going to do or not do, or whether we're going to continue on the same course.
Right.
But give me an idea of, has that forecast been done?
The forecast hasn't really been completed at the system level. Some of our institutions have done it out for the next 4 years. I think what we're seeing this year, because of so many of the changes in really the economy, some of the other pressures that are on our students, this was a little bit of an unexpected year. Madison saw some things in the number of students that actually showed up that couldn't have been predicted with the 10-year trends that they had. And so this is a year that has kind of said it is time to sit down, look at what's happening with these freshman enrollments that are moving through and that we've had over the years. Look at what's going on with transfer students, and has that changed? And what we're seeing right now is the way that where the transfer students come from, the numbers that we're getting in transfer students really hasn't changed very much. But we do need to sit down and as a system sort of put together the system numbers. But to do that, we've got to grow it from the individual institutions, because they're the ones that really have the enrollments. They're the ones that are going to be able to impact and understand how the students they have on their campuses are reacting to these changes, and what they're doing to impact those changes as well.
So if you come back, because I think we are going to discuss this some more in 3 months, would you think those type of forecasts would be better than available looking forward for us to act on?
Certainly by the spring we'll have a much better idea of what those are like. Sometime late this fall we'll have our more final numbers for fall enrollments. One of our institutions actually has we won't know their actual numbers until on into January or so. One of our institutions allows the students who enroll in the winterim to take advantage of the plateau in tuition from the fall. So if they enroll in the fall and the winterim, they get to count all those credits together. So their numbers don't become final until after the winterim term is over. So we'll actually get those total final numbers for fall nailed down sometime in the end of January. We'll have a really good picture, though, in November.
Any other questions, comments for Paul or Mark? All right. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thanks. And with assurance to the Regents that we will be back with more analysis and more final numbers and some thoughts, as the President was suggesting, looking forward about what we need to do about those numbers after we do the analysis. Well, at this time, I wanted to share some news with you from around the system, starting with an award from the Wisconsin Library Association. It has named the Coffin Library at UW Green Bay the 2012 State Library of the Year. In making the announcement, the Library Association noted, quote, UW Green Bay's founding chancellor, Edward Widener, placed the Coffin Library at the physical center of the campus. During the past 3 years, Director Paula Ganyard and the library staff have worked hard to make it the heart of the university as well. Reducing barriers to access is a hallmark of the library's success, the association added, and noteworthy services include using technology to deliver information to desktop and mobile devices, and librarians using multiple channels to communicate and respond to user requests, such as email, chat, cell phones, text messaging, Facebook, and Twitter. The improved marketing efforts have paid off with a 25% increase in reference transactions during the past 3 years and a 230% increase in interlibrary loan usage. So congratulations to Chancellor Hardin and his colleagues at Green Bay. From UW River Falls, Chancellor Dean Van Dalen reports that Ab Nicholas, chairman and CEO of Nicholas Company, has made a $750,000 gift toward naming and construction of the Don Page Arena on the River Falls campus. Nicholas and Page became friends as teammates and starters on the 1950 University of Wisconsin-Madison basketball team. Page went on to become the most influential figure in the history of UW River Falls athletics. His long and distinguished career as a teacher, coach, and administrator began in 1957 and lasted until his retirement in 1992. Don Page, who died in 2010, was inducted into the Wisconsin Football Coaches Association Hall of Fame in 2004 and was part of the inaugural Wisconsin Intercollegiate Athletics Hall of Fame class installed earlier this year. The university, in partnership with his family and friends, is seeking to raise $1 million to name the new arena for Don Page. Page's son, David, said, quote, after all the accolades and all the halls of fame, there can be no greater honor paid to Dad than the enshrinement of his legacy in the naming of the arena at UW River Falls after him, unless perhaps that it was made possible by his friend. So the arena will be part of the Falcon Center at UW River Falls, which is currently in the design phase and is scheduled for construction beginning in 2014. The Wisconsin Center for Dairy Research at UW-Madison has been awarded one of 7 I-6 challenge grants from the U.S. Department of Commerce to support an effort to commercialize research ideas that will positively impact economic development. The Dairy Research Center, along with state industry and university partners, will use the federal funds to help develop new products for fast-growing Asian markets, create new higher-value uses for cheese and dairy byproducts such as whey to grow exports, and develop healthier dairy-based alternatives for school lunch menus. The effort will get matching support from the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, which will provide $200,000 toward Wisconsin firms that seek to commercialize CDR dairy technologies, and from the Wisconsin Milk Marketing Board, which will provide access to detailed consumer marketing and product innovation databases and promotional support. Paul Jaden, who joined us yesterday for the READY committee meeting, WEDC's Chief Executive Officer, says, quote, this partnership between WEDC and UW-Madison is an example of what can be done to strengthen new business and entrepreneurial activity across the state from the ideas that come from our state universities. So congratulations to Interim Chancellor Ward on both the grant and the partnership. The UW-Eau Claire Foundation has received a gift of $1.25 million to establish a permanently endowed faculty chair in the sciences or mathematics at UW-Eau Claire. That gift is the fulfillment of an estate gift from James and Ann Ramsey in memory of James Ramsey's brother, U.S. Navy Lieutenant Oliver Marion Ramsey, a 1933 UW-Eau Claire graduate who later served as a lieutenant in the Navy during World War II and died in the naval battle of Guadalcanal in 1942. The Oliver Marion Ramsey Endowed Chair is UW-Eau Claire's first fully endowed faculty chair in the College of Arts and Sciences. The first faculty recipient of that chair will be announced before the 2013-14 academic year. In one other piece of news from UW-Eau Claire, Interim Chancellor Bousquet tells us that for the 5th time, a member of the chemistry faculty at his institution has been honored with the prestigious Henry Dreyfuss Teacher Scholar Award. Dr. Kurt Weigel is just one of just 7 people nationwide to receive the 2012 award, which recognizes young chemical sciences faculty as outstanding teachers and for their scholarly research with undergraduates. Dr. Weigel receives a $60,000 grant for his research on liquid crystalline molecules, such as those widely used in electronic products like computer monitors or cell phone displays. Since 2001, only one other school in the nation, that would be Mount Holyoke College in Massachusetts, has received more Dreyfuss Awards than UW-Eau Claire. UW-Marinette's new shipyard orientation program is riding a wave, so to speak. Just last week, Dean Paula Langto was invited to provide demonstrations of UW-Marinette's 3D virtual shipyard orientation program for high-level U.S. Navy officials at an event in Washington, D.C., put on by the National Shipbuilding Research Program, or NSRP. The project has also received recognition in several national shipbuilding publications. For the past 5 years, UW-Marinette has been working with the NSRP shipyards to develop programs that are responsive to the needs of the U.S. shipbuilding industry. I'd also like to note that UW-Marinette is the first institution in North America to develop a fast-track, distance-delivered set of courses in a full certificate program in modern shipbuilding design. So I think, if I recall right, Chancellor Cross is an Army vet, but I believe he's supportive of this kind of naval engagement nonetheless. No, he's not. He is. Graduates of UW-La Crosse's College of Business Administration have something to brag about. It turns out that the May 2012 graduates scored higher than 93% of other business students from universities across the country on a test measuring their subject knowledge in business. The Educational Testing Service major field test for a bachelor's degree in business compared students from about 440 business schools across the nation. So I understand Chancellor Gao has already begun to calculate the likely return on investment from this accomplishment in higher alumni contribution rates in the future. UW-Oshkosh reports that it's making significant progress on the development of its University Studies program, the pioneering redesign of general education for every student that Provost Lane Earns spoke about at our last meeting, built upon explorations or quests of sustainability, cultural understanding, and civic engagement. The University Studies program launches in fall 2013. New courses, many of which have been creatively, collaboratively built from the ground up by UWO faculty, are now being selected. This month, UW-Oshkosh will host dozens of community agencies and nonprofits on campus to let them know how they can partner with and benefit from the estimated 900 students who will be in the first wave to undertake civic engagement projects to fulfill one of the program's most groundbreaking requirements. So we look forward to hearing further progress reports from Provost Earns and Chancellor Wells as this program moves ahead. Dr. Joan Prince, UW-Milwaukee's Vice Chancellor for Global Inclusion and Engagement, has been nominated by President Obama and sworn in as an alternate representative of the United States to the 67th session of the General Assembly of the United Nations. She began her appointment, which comes with the rank of ambassador, in mid-September. Chancellor Lovell notes that Dr. Prince will continue to be, quote, a vital and contributing member of the UWM family during her appointment and is sure to open more doors for international opportunities for students, faculty, and staff. A native of Milwaukee, Dr. Prince earned a bachelor's degree in medical technology, a master's degree in clinical laboratory sciences, and a doctorate in urban education, all from UWM. GI Jobs magazine recently released its 2013 list of military-friendly colleges nationwide, and I'm pleased to report that all 13 of our four-year UW institutions made the list. The list, which considers both financial and non-financial efforts to recruit and retain military and veteran students, honors the top 15% of colleges, universities, and trade schools nationwide that are doing the most to embrace America's service members and veterans as students. To earn this ranking, a university is evaluated in areas such as flexibility in class scheduling and requirements, transferring academic credits, providing support for veterans and academic accreditation. So we should be proud to receive this recognition as we continue to do our part to support those who serve our country. And if plans don't go awry, President Smith, I think we'll hear more about our veterans' efforts at the November board meeting. On a related note, UW-Superior, which currently has more than 150 military veterans and students now enrolled, just opened its Veteran and Non-Traditional Students Center. The center is designed to provide additional services to students who are veterans, active military personnel, or age 25 and older. I'm also pleased to focus on news of some major collaborations between GE Healthcare and our two doctoral campuses. In mid-September, UW-Milwaukee Chancellor Lovell announced a $3 million commitment from GE Healthcare to support a first-of-its-kind talent pipeline for Wisconsin-based medical imaging software developers and researchers. The new partnership includes a $1 million donation to establish the GE Healthcare Center for Advanced Computational Imaging at UWM. The 5-year joint effort will enable UWM to develop advanced-level coursework in software development and will provide seed funding for research and collaborative projects related to cutting-edge medical technology. Meanwhile, the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and Public Health at UW-Madison, the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, and GE Healthcare also announced new agreements that celebrate more than 30 years of research collaboration and technology invention, with an anticipated $32.9 million GE investment in a state-of-the-art imaging research facility on the Madison campus. That center will be located in the Wisconsin Institutes for Medical Research, which is connected to the UW Health Sciences Learning Center and UW hospitals and clinics. The 10-year agreement supports GE Healthcare's collaborative research program with UW-Madison's Department of Radiology and Medical Physics, which Paul DeLuca could tell us a lot about if we asked him, but we won't. We don't have time. According to WARF, during the past 11 years, collaborations between GE and UW researchers have resulted in nearly 200 invention disclosures, more than 80 filed U.S. patents, and numerous licensing agreements and technology improvements. So this is a very promising enterprise, and congratulations to both Chancellor Lowell and Interim Chancellor Ward and their respective campuses on those GE partnerships. Finally, I have some very good news to share from right here at UW-Stout about a young man whose life was saved thanks to the quick action of a friend and 2 campus police officers. It was an evening just over 3 weeks ago on this campus when 18-year-old Ryan Child, a freshman from Lake Geneva, was returning to South Hall with a friend following a scholarship award ceremony right here in this building. As it turns out, Ryan never made it. They were about halfway to their rooms when Ryan suddenly collapsed face down on the ground. He was in cardiac arrest. His friend David Winger immediately called 911 and then noticed 2 campus police officers exiting South Hall about 100 yards away. Officers Lisa Peterson and Jason Spetz just happened to have an appointment in South Hall that evening. Officer Spetz radioed the Dunn County 911 center, and within minutes the paramedics were on their way. In the meantime, Officer Peterson did chest compressions on Ryan while Officer Spetz held Ryan's airway open. Once the ambulance arrived, a defibrillator was used to revive Ryan, and he began breathing again. He was eventually flown by helicopter to the Mayo Clinic Health System in Eau Claire, where doctors determined that he has a genetic abnormality, which some of you may have heard of in cases of some young athletes dying. It's called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, a condition that, left undetected, is the most common cause of sudden death among young people. Fortunately for Ryan, it's now been identified, and thanks to the quick action of his friend, campus police officers, and medical experts, he's been given a second chance. So Ryan will resume his classes online in the spring and return to this campus next fall. He knows he was lucky. He said, quote, "My doctor kept saying, if you were by yourself that night, you would not be here right now." So our very best wishes for a speedy recovery to Ryan, our congratulations and thanks to his friend and our police officers who stayed calm and carried on, as the British phrase goes, and saved a young man's life thereby. Chancellor Sorensen, I know, and everybody at Stout feel like they're off to a special start to their academic year because of this story with a desperate start and a happy ending. And I know the 2 police officers involved who came to Ryan's assistance are here with us this morning, and I'd like to ask them to please stand so we can recognize their good work, Officer Peterson and Officer Spence. And I'll conclude my remarks, President Smith, with a kind of Halloween-y poem. Halloweeny. This is a 17th century poem by Robert Herrick, 17th century English author, and they were doing Halloween kind of things even back then, based on the ancient Celtic feast of Samhain, the harvest feast in which the dead were said to be able to arise and walk for 24 hours at the end of October. So this is a poem called The Hag by Robert Herrick. The hag is astride this night for to ride, the devil and she together. Through thick and through thin, now out and then in, though ne'er so foul be the weather. A thorn or a burr she takes for a spur, with the lash of a bramble she rides now. Through brakes and through briars, o'er ditches and mires, she follows the spirit that guides now. No beast for his food dares now range the wood, but hushed in his lair he lies lurking, while mischiefs by these, on land and on seas, at noon of the night are working. The storm will arise and trouble the skies this night, and more for the wonder, the ghost from the tomb affrighted shall come, called out by the clap of the thunder. Happy Halloween to all. Over to you.
Thank you, President Riley. I'm now pleased to introduce a topic that I hope will become a standard part of our agenda. One of the recommendations of the Ad Hoc Committee on Board Roles and Responsibilities that President Spector appointed late last year, chaired by Regent Bradley, was that regular opportunities be provided during board meetings for chancellors to brief the board directly on their strategic goals, their progress in meeting those goals, and impediments they face in meeting those goals. This recommendation was in keeping with the Ad Hoc Committee's theme that board meetings should emphasize high-level policy setting and strategic directions rather than just operational issues. Essentially, the idea was that chancellors would communicate with the board about such topics as an institution's long-term goals for carrying out its mission, improvements in undergraduate or graduate education, inclusive excellent efforts, plans for new programs or enrollment management, and implementation challenges. While chancellors would take the lead in these presentations, I think the committee recognized that there might also include stakeholders, key faculty, research and staff, or even foundations, donors, or alumni. Ideally, we will have a report on strategic goals from one chancellor at each of our two-day board meetings. Once all chancellors have presented, chancellors would have an opportunity to return to report back on progress or new developments. When Jane issued the invitation for chancellors to do these presentations, Chancellor Sorensen quickly stepped up and volunteered for October. So I'm pleased to again welcome Chancellor Sorensen to lead a discussion of UW-Stout's strategic goals.
Well, thank you, Regent Smith. You know, I realized I should have a poem to counter President Riley's poem, and if I would have known you were going to quote that poem, I would have read Michael Wigglesworth's 1672 Puritan, Days of Doom. So I'll try and do that once in a while, Kevin, for your benefit. Before we begin today, though, I'd like to take a minute to thank all the great people that I've worked for over the years at UW-Stout. That's because nothing could have been done here without the talented, energetic, and dedicated faculty, staff, and students that I've been privileged to work with throughout my career. In good times and bad, they have never wavered in their efforts to provide our students with the best education possible and move the university forward. All of our best ideas and innovations have come from our faculty, staff, and students. That's why Stout is such a great place to work and I feel very privileged to come to work daily to work with these fine people. So with that, let's talk about planning. Planning at Stout is a very inclusive process that allows everyone on campus a chance to have input into what we're doing, what we should do in the future. The entire campus is involved in a meaningful way. Every summer we have a retreat with our planning process group to see what we do for the following years, short, 2 years out and 5 years out. And 82% of all plans that we fund go to the central focus of our campus education. 18% goes to my division. That's primarily technology, the black hole of higher ed. And only 1% goes to administration. So our planning process reinforces at every corner the real central mission of who we are. I'm going to share this presentation with Dr. Meredith Drzakowski. Meredith is Assistant Chancellor, reports to me directly. She's in charge of our planning, analysis, research, and quality program here. And I would urge you, when you have questions about planning, ask Meredith. I'll step aside. But it is a dynamic process here. It's one that we engage in virtually monthly, and the results have been pretty profound. So today, we're going to talk about our planning process, what we accomplished, how the planning process works, and the challenges for the planning process and goals for the future. So first, some of the major accomplishments that we've done here, I think the most substantial, as you look at the overall picture, is the expansion of the program array. I mentioned that, I think, yesterday, too, that we've grown from 20 programs in 1988 to 45 programs today at the undergraduate level, from 15 programs at the graduate level to 19. We have made a major increase in our growth in DE courses that we take away from campus. We had 131 courses online in 2001 and 2, and today we have 677. We doubled virtually every other comprehensive school in the UW system. We employ roughly 100% of our graduates after 6 years, after 6 months away from school. And we talked about that too. We focus on experiential learning, co-ops, internships. You heard from a student yesterday, a very dynamic student who went to Nassau for a co-op, has been offered to return the following summer. Anecdotally, I met a young woman the other day in a restaurant who had 3 co-op experiences in retail, was offered 3 jobs. She's a first semester senior, so as she graduates in May, she'll have a choice of positions to go to. A lot of things go into our placement rate, but clearly it's a major thing that we are quite proud of. As a polytechnic, we have growth in external funding to the point that we could underwrite the Discovery Center, our applied research center for the campus. And Mark, I want to let you repeat that right now, please, and tell us what you think about UW-Stout and the Manufacturing Outreach Center. I didn't pay Mark to do that, but I will. But I think the Discovery Center is a major feature of what we do now, and we are going from TAP projects into prototyping and product development. So there's an exciting future there. We have a Discovery Center, the Discovery Center and the Ethics Center. Again, a $2 million gift a couple of years ago endowed an ethics center. So we're infusing ethics into every program at UW-Stout. We have worked with the healthcare industry on medical ethics. So that's a great thing that we're doing as well. And that came again from a private gift of over $2 million. We have I think a major thing we've accomplished at UW-Stout the last 8 or 9 years has been enrollment growth, a very consistent, persistent growth. We call it smart growth. We didn't want to grow too quickly, too fast. We didn't do that. We focused on new programs, customized instruction. We focused on taking our programs away from campus, and today we serve about 1,600 students away from campus. We've had program growth on campus. We've nearly closed the achievement gap and retention rates for racial ethnic minorities, and we're proud of that. So the planning process has been, it's from the bottom up. We talk to faculty, staff, and students, incorporate that into short-term plans, long-term plans, and I think we have developed a pretty dynamic school because of that. So I'm going to turn this over to Meredith now to talk about the integrated planning in some detail, and we'll both be able to answer questions when she's through. And I'll come back for a few more minutes after she's done. So Meredith?
Thanks. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today about our planning process and our challenges in meeting our goals for the future. Over the past couple of days, you've been hearing a lot about major accomplishments at Stout, new initiatives, and major milestones over the last 25 years. It's this process that we're going to be talking about today that's the primary driver for making those things happen. What you see on the screen is a visual of what our planning process looks like at a high level. In the short time we have today, I'm going to be hitting some of the highlights of that process. First, at Stout, our strategic plans are 5-year plans. At the beginning of each plan, we identify targets on a small number of critical metrics. You've been hearing about some of those today and yesterday. For example, our distance education programs, our placement rates, our retention rates. And then in order to achieve those 5-year plans, we do annual initiatives to help achieve the goals. And I'm going to talk about those next. 2 critical components of our planning process is one, that it is aligned, and then second, that we have cascading plans. What you see on the graphic on the left-hand side are an example of all of the action plans that are part of our planning process. So just to give you a couple of examples, inclusive excellence is one of our action plans. We also have an academic plan, which identifies new academic programs that are planned for the next several years. On an annual basis, we have action plan leaders associated with each of these action plans, and they each identify 3 to 5 high-level initiatives that they plan to complete in the next year. Then you see the double-sided arrow going over to the box of major unit and college plans. On an annual basis, our major units and colleges do their own strategic plan. And what this is it shows how they contribute to the university action plans, and it also serves as a feeder for new initiatives that would later get added into the action plans. All of our action plans are tied to budget. Cumulatively, through our strategic planning process, we've reallocated millions of dollars. One of the ways that this works is when the action plan leaders submit their 3 to 5 initiatives for the year, they include any resource allocations that are needed to achieve those goals. So some examples of things that we have been able to fund, we've done a curricular incubation center that has helped achieve the goals you heard about in the expansion of program array. Our eScholar program is part of our planning process. We've also done numerous retention and recruitment initiatives through this process, to give you a few examples. One hallmark of our planning process is that it's participatory. You have 3 examples of that on the screen, and you've heard a little bit about some of these. The first one is our visioning session, and this is how we engage our external stakeholders in the process. So about every 5 years, we bring a group of external stakeholders to campus, and we ask them to think about what Stout should look like in the next 5 to 7 years. And the outcome of that becomes our strategic plan for the next 5 years. So the last time we did this was in 2008. We had about 85 people on campus, included members of the Board of Regents, included members from System, business and community leaders, K-12 leaders, and they got together to think about what we should look like in the year 2015. So our current strategic plan is what we should look like by the year 2015. A second example is our engagement session. On an annual basis, we invite all of our faculty, staff, and students to participate in this campus-wide event. They get together in small groups, hear about our proposed new initiatives for the year, and then provide suggestions for how we can accomplish them. We've done this for the last 2 years, and we've had about half of our faculty and staff attend the sessions. And a third example of the participatory process is our strategic planning group. This is the group that's responsible for finalizing our strategic plan, monitoring progress, and ensuring that we achieve those 5-year goals. And this is about 35 people with campus-wide representation. It includes, for example, members of the Faculty Senate, Senate of Academic Staff, classified staff, students, deans, and directors. Also, not only do we ask for input, but we feel it's important to show the campus that we've used that input in meaningful ways. And one of the ways that we do that is through a program that we call You Said, We Did. This is something that we just started last year. we identified more than 10 action items to implement based on the feedback from the 2011 engagement session. And you see an example of one of them on the screen. We heard from the faculty that they didn't have enough technical support in the classroom. And so under that You Said heading, those are examples of specific comments that were submitted to us from the 2011 engagement session. And so what we did in response is we provided funding to add 2 new technicians that provide dedicated support to faculty in the classroom. And we have an evaluation plan in place to determine if this was effective in meeting this need. So we've been using this planning process for about 15 years, and through that process we've learned a lot about what makes it effective for us. And so I'd like to share with you some of our keys to success. First, we need help from our stakeholders to help us set our vision. Then once that vision is set, we need to include the faculty and staff in meaningful ways in helping us to achieve that vision. And not only do we need to ask them for their input, we need to show them that we're using it in meaningful ways and communicate to them that to them regularly. Also for us, strategic planning is all about thinking big. We start with ideas. What is it that we want to accomplish? Rather than starting with, this is how much money we have, what can we do with that? First, we identify the vision, what is it that we want to achieve, and then after we know what we want to achieve, then we determine what the resource needs are to make that happen. So funding the initiatives doesn't just mean allocating money, it means allocating time, space, and other needs that are needed to make it happen. Strategic planning is all about change, and we know that change is difficult. So we've learned that in order to be successful, we need to allow those difficult conversations to happen, and we need to expect that it's going to take a lot of time to get us to the point where we need to be. And finally, we've learned that we need to be flexible. This process has changed continuously over the past 15 years. It's going to continue to change in the future. The You Said We Did example that we gave, that was just started last year. So we're always looking for new ways to improve the process. So those were some examples of how our process works. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about challenges in meeting those goals for the future. So the first one is the balance between the need for high retention and graduation rates and the need to provide students access to higher education. There is a lot of research that shows that students who come in with higher ACT scores and higher class ranks are more likely to be retained and graduate than those that come in with lower scores. And you can see how that plays out on this chart on the screen. There are differences in retention rates based on admission requirements at different schools. So Stout would be considered in this chart in the traditional category, and the average first to second year retention rate for traditional schools is 71.5%. We've consistently been at about that level for the past several years. But if you look, for example, at the highly selective schools, that's an average of 90% retention rate. So quite a bit of difference depending on the type of student you admit. So this issue presents challenges for us in the future, because if you look at national reports and publications, those highly selective schools are compared right alongside the traditional schools. A second example that we've been talking about already is declining budgets. You heard that yesterday. The percent of funding that Stout receives from the state is 13%. You can see on this chart how that has changed over time. The pink line shows the changes in the amount of funding that we get from the state, and then the blue line shows the changes in funding that we get from tuition. One of the areas that we're particularly concerned about is our inability to pay competitive salaries to our faculty and staff. To give you some examples, in a national survey, Stout's professors and associate professors are paid in the 12th percentile for master's institutions. Our assistant professors are paid in the 21st percentile. A record number of faculty and staff are leaving the institution for other positions. There was an increase of approximately 43% in the number of faculty and staff leaving in the past year. Another challenge is the growth in the number of metrics and targets that we track as part of the planning process. At the national level, we're members of the Voluntary System of Accountability. There's also another initiative coming out from Obama, the Obama Scorecard, and you see a visual of part of what the latest version of that looks like on the right-hand side of the screen. Also, at the state level, we have initiatives coming out that give us more metrics to track. For example, Act 32 introduced about 50 metrics that we now need to track. And then locally, at both the system level and the campus level, we have initiatives that we're tracking as part of our own planning process. The system office is already taking a leadership role here in looking to try and integrate these diverse metrics into our overall accountability report. And the fourth challenge, which we've already spent a lot of time talking about today, is the declining high school graduates. Since this trend was already talked about in the last presentation, I'm not going to go through it again. I will add, though, that we have done some of our own projections of what we expect this will have on our ability to recruit new freshmen. A couple of years ago, our targets for new freshmen were 1,525. We project that if we look at this decline in high school graduates, we'd be down to about 1,400 new freshmen by the year 2015, and then it would start to climb back up. So one of the ways that we are responding to this is looking to grow transfer students and graduate students, and you'll hear about that next. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Chancellor Sorensen to go through our goals for the future.
Well, thank you, Meredith, and let me just conclude this with a few slides on our short-term goals and a real brief overview of what the long-term goals are. First, we plan by 2013 by fall 2013 to decrease time to degree down to 120 credits. It'll vary by some programs. Some accreditation programs won't allow that, like engineering probably won't, but we're pressing every program down to that level just so we can have a more efficient baccalaureate set of programs that students can get through in an efficient way. Competitive salaries. We are working hard, analyzing where the shortfalls are, how we internally reallocate money toward that, and then supporting clearly a statewide pay plan to address those issues. It is critical. Last August, we lost 4 people. The third week in August, 3 in our design program, industrial design program, because they left for salaries ranging from $20,000 to $50,000 more than we were able to pay. So this is a critical issue for this school and fitting to UW. We're targeting transfer students and grad students because of the freshman decline, and we're working very, very diligently and hard on increased scholarship support through our foundation, and we get quite a bit of support from some corporations in specialized areas like packaging. We are continuing to infuse diversity into the curriculum, and we'll continue that effort in a significant way the next several years. And we're talking about regional cooperation, River Falls, Eau Claire, Stout, talking to Superior and to La Crosse about can we regionalize some things. And the things we've explored a bit are some IT issues and perhaps e-textbook issues, getting rid of surplus material, talking about maybe training on a regional basis, software licensing. And this has just begun, but I think we have a chance to look at becoming more efficient by regionalizing some of our efforts in the northwest Wisconsin. And the academic plan, we submitted to the system a proposal for our first doctoral program in it's career and technical education. We are, I think yesterday you approved at the Thursday meeting and a professional science master's degree program, and we'll see a lot of growth in certificate programs as well. The long-term goals, the vision we have for 5 years, 8 years, 10 years out, would be number one, to rethink the fiscal model for our campus, how we're going to work with a restricted amount of money to become more efficient in business efforts and delivery of our degree efforts. We're going to establish or discuss that very fully in e-college, where we have a very vibrant, dynamic outreach in DE, and we want to, through the internet, we want to put a structure around that allows for good leadership, allows for quality control, allows for good solid planning, allows for faculty development, and a distinct identity for this effort. We plan to remain on course to become a vibrant emerging research institution. We have the Discovery Center. We have a medical device center within that now. We're going to a donor in 2 weeks asking for money for an institute for research in that center, so we'll maintain that as a sharp focus. We will increase our research funds to between $15 and $18 million a year. We're about $8 million now, and that's a stretch goal that we are very serious about. We'll increase the foundation from $40 to $60 million in assets by about 2020. We'll develop the next phase of our e-scholar program, the laptop program, what device, how do we use it, how do we provide, again, continued training on that to increase the learning paradigm, and eliminate the minority retention gap by 2025 and achieve 100% participation in experiential learning by 2015 or 2018. So that, in short, is our planning process, some short and long-term goals, and we'll be very happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Chancellor Sorensen. Let me just ask, if I could start out, you mentioned yesterday and today the number of distance learning courses you have.
Right.
It seems to be, as you mentioned, a very high number.
677.
What has been the reaction to those? Obviously, it's been good if you've got those, but you seem to have so many more. And what has led to it? Give us a little background on that.
Well, we just pushed the agenda very, very hard and empowered key people on campus to go out and identify cohorts of individuals that needed education that couldn't come to campus. And so our biggest program is in management, for example. But we also have a very dynamic program at the master's level in education certification. That's kind of a worldwide program. We have students from across the country, in some cases from across the world, and faculty that we brought in to teach just that program. So we simply carved out a vision for how do we balance the decreased number of available students in the upper Midwest with going out and providing a different kind of model. We copied the Phoenix model, more or less. We copied the for-profit model of going out and identifying and then providing the education. It's been very successful. The demand is there. If you provide what students want, where they want it, how they want it, they'll come. We demonstrated that. Our challenge now is quality control. Put a structure around that. I call it the e-college. You maybe call it something else, but we need to have a leadership, and we can pay for that by the money we take in from these programs. We need to have strong leadership that drives a strong strategic plan for that really monitors who we hire, how we train them, monitor all the interactions with the student, make sure that the assessments are there for the outcomes that we need. So we want to really formalize that as our arm to outreach to this group. And it's been successful. We think it can become more successful.
Has this been primarily adult? Have you found that it's been more aimed at the
more
adult?
non-traditional students that need this, yes.
Right. Regent Bradley.
Chuck, if tuition went up in the last 2 years and the percentage of your revenue from tuition went down in the last 2 years, where did the rest of your money come from?
Excess enrollment. We had, up until this year, we had a good enrollment that's driven excessive tuition dollars for us. And we keep those dollars. We've had customized instruction dollars that we charge more to the market price of what people can and want to pay for the program. That's been a pool of money that's non-state driven, so we have a pool to reinvest in the enterprise and continue the dynamic quality of what we're doing there.
If I might, another question. You mentioned this critical issue about competitive salaries. If the state of Wisconsin is not going to allocate additional funds for you and other campuses to address that, you've got some ability to address it with the new flexibilities that the legislature has given you. What else do you need if there isn't going to be additional funding?
Well, if there isn't a pay plan from the state, we have to reallocate base dollars into our faculty and staff. And that's very painful. We are going through that process right now. We have the right to offer a supplemental pay plan for our faculty, not across the board and not to everyone. But we identified the amount of money we want to reallocate for that process. We identified $500,000. But that's reallocation. You're taking from a base here to a base there, and you'll lose that flexibility because you have now base salary dollars. When we do that, though, just like the retention funds that Kevin has provided for us the last several years, if a person gets an additional amount of money to retain them, when that person leaves, we take that particular slice back into the pool to reallocate it on a more temporary basis. But if they stay, that's their base forever. So I think the challenge is going to be work with the state to demonstrate that if they don't invest in our faculty and staff, the world-class system we have can't remain a world-class system. It's as simple as that. This is a people business. You have to have good people to teach our students. And I think it's a critical issue right now. We're trying to hire a provost right now. We've identified a final four and one internal. And every person that's external to the campus is now making more money as an academic dean than the top of our salary schedule for a provost. Folks, it just doesn't work like that in the real world. I heard the coaches talk yesterday about they're driven by market. Well, so are we. You have to be able to pay the people. And I think we're reaching that tipping point. We're losing people. We're not attracting those that would come here. Probably some aren't even applying here. We've had people call and say, "What's your salary schedule?" Our salary schedule for a provost is $128 to $162, and some have laughed at us and said, "No, thank you." So it's a critical issue. It's not just something that we make up. This is a real issue for the UW system.
So these other candidates are making more than the top of your range.
Right.
They're not making more than your current provost. They're making more than the top of your range.
Right.
Good.
Chuck, I think this collaboration between you and Eau Claire and River Falls and Superior is a really terrific thing, and I wondered if you just talk briefly a little more about it. In particular, I'm just curious how you identify how you're going through the process on this campus and the other campuses in terms of deciding what are the areas.
We're in the kind of the elementary stages, but my vice chancellor for administration, Phil Lyon, I think he's back there, right there. He has been leading the discussion with other CBOs on what are the areas that we can't cooperate in. And we want to start low-hanging fruit. Can we cooperate on, say, excess surplus and getting rid of that from our campus? We have a pretty good process, and can we use our model for that? Or Eau Claire has a great printing center. Can we work with Eau Claire to do our printing for us in a collaborative way? The IT, the CIOs from Superior, La Crosse, and the River Falls, Stout, and Eau Claire talk every Friday morning. They have a Friday conference call. They're talking about, is there a way to collaborate on, common licensing or common purchasing, or how could we plan together for IT in these campuses? So it's in the beginning stages, but everyone's willing to sit down and talk about collaboration to save dollars and become more efficient. It is rather exciting, I think.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I think we have 5 willing schools to talk about ideas and then see where that goes.
You mentioned to Regent Bradley that one of the keys to the last couple of years was tuition you used for the revenue. So now we're talking about, in the last hour, a prediction that you may go to incoming freshmen from over 1,500 down to 1,400. What is that going to mean to Stout if you only have the number of incoming freshmen decreases by 125 people.
Well, it's going to decrease our flexibility for dollars coming in. Meredith, where are we right now? Our enrollment per freshman, I think, is this year.
Yeah, we're close to 1,500 this year. We are also planning for increases in transfer students and graduate students so that we can continue to incrementally grow the total population.
And become a lot more aggressive in international students. We have a contract with Saudi Arabia, a 3-year contract to bring in 100 Saudis a year to train in technical education, and then go back and become teachers in Saudi Arabia. So we are becoming much more aggressive in that area too. And Gio's, he's a very good partner, by the way, for us as an interim chancellor. We've had a marvelous several meetings, he and I, and quite willing to work together. So I think that, and that's one of the areas, internationalization. So we're trying to really focus sharply on areas that we haven't been delinquent in, but haven't been as aggressive as we should have been.
About out-of-state students? At the table I was at this morning for breakfast, 80% were from out of state. Is there some effort to?
Yeah, there is. I think, you know, you have to be realistic. These schools, like Stout, we're known in some areas on a national level. I say 3 areas that we're known. We're known for voc rehab. We're known for hospitality management. We're known for dietetics. Those are the 3 that we gather students from around the country in. Otherwise, everyone has engineering programs near them. We have some good engineering here. So we have to realize that most of our students come from a radius of 100 miles from the campus. And that's true of virtually every campus in the UW system. So we're more limited in out-of-state. We get 30% of our students from Minnesota in reciprocity, but otherwise we have a Colorado connection in construction. I don't know how that happened, but we do. So we'll try to capitalize on those kinds of things and go for the out-of-state student. But it's going to be more limited. We are aggressively pursuing Chicago. Everyone is too, though. I mean, we're going to put a recruiter down in North Chicago. But everyone's doing that. So the competition is being ratcheted up, you know, in every urban area in the country today. But we're going to do that.
Questions, comments for Chancellor? Thank you much. We can, Bradley.
So, Chuck, thinking of, you know, you're talking about how you, and I know the other chancellors also, everybody's looking at all these ways to keep the ship afloat with alternative sources of revenue, and I include in that reaching out to students that wouldn't typically be here at this campus, from other states, from other countries. When you look at that 100-mile radius and that pool of potential students, if you either had lower tuition or you had increased financial aid, would you be able to fill your spaces with the students from that 100-mile radius?
Absolutely. I think that the advantage of the Blue Gold commitment, which I really admire, they can use some of that money for scholarships. We don't have that ability. And I think it takes exactly that to get students here. You know, we have to raise private dollars for our scholarships, and our foundation is healthy, but it depends on do they want to give towards scholarships or not. If a donor wants to give me $2 million, and this has happened twice the last 4 years, gotten $2 million gifts from donors, and I said, scholarship? No. No scholarships. They gave us money, some other money for scholarships, but not that money. So you have to go with what the donors want. But if we had more adequate financial aid, I'm not blaming anyone because that's private dollars we have to raise, we could attract more students. We demonstrated in our school that we give students of color financial aid. The retention rate, we did a pilot of, I think, maybe 20 students, guaranteed a certain amount, like $2,000 a year for 4 years. 90% came back the second year, maybe 95%. It's a retention issue as well. So attract and retain. Yes, we need more financial.
Tyler.
One of the things that I just see from my own perspective as manufacturers, we've got 500 team members now, with the vast majority of them having some sort of technical college experience, and it's unrealistic for anybody to say, well, I'm going to take 2 years off and go back to school. I mean, we do have some very aggressive individuals that are doing that, but that's the exception. And I think when you talk about that 100-mile radius and engaging the adult worker that's currently employed, that's maybe a supervisor, department manager that's looking for that next step up, I mean, I think it's really critical to have those entrance and exit points that aren't 2 years long, that aren't 4 years long, that are maybe a few semesters where they can, because typically at that point the financial aid issue isn't an issue because the company's willing and anxious to upgrade that person's skill set. So I'm not sure what the program is called. I know Wendy Dittman is involved in it, but those kinds of programs where you can kind of custom fit to that need of that individual is we see a lot of our folks interested in that, and but it's got to fit in with the rest of life,
right? Which
is challenging from the school's perspective.
Well, I think you asked me why DE has increased so much. In part, that's exactly it. Now we haven't modified our program to competency based like we're doing for through Extension now, which is a very unique and excellent program. There probably will be some of that coming because that speaks to Mark's point about different entry and exit levels for the students. But because we could provide the programs on the internet, and because they have access to computers, we could do that, and it's growing exponentially. So, and we think there's more growth there. I don't know what the final limit is because we really haven't put together a strategic plan yet, and we will. We have simply floated cohort groups out there, identify them, provide needs for them, and they have taken the opportunity to do that. So it's be a lot more planning around those issues. But I really admire what Ray Cross is doing in the deep degree program.
All right, thank you, Chuck.
Okay, thank you very much.
Appreciate it. We'll move to the committee reports, and we have a written report of the Ready Committee that's been provided. I'll ask Regent Bradley to comment briefly and respond to any questions.
Thank you very much, President Smith. I'm pleased to announce that we are well on our way on an economic plan that will guide our efforts for the UW system. And we know that in order to build this out the best way possible, we're going to need the participation and good thoughts of many individuals and experts from across the system as well as from the business community and others. Our committee meeting yesterday provided an opportunity to outline our strategic plan, or strategic direction, I should say, and it also highlighted our partnership with the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, or WEDC. Specifically, Michael Morgan articulated the vision, mission, and strategic objectives for the newly formed Office of Economic Development. Starting with our mission. Our mission is to connect the talent of the university, faculty, and staff with Wisconsin businesses in order to build better communities and to foster job retention and growth. Our vision is to serve as a 21st century global model for talent development, research, innovation, and technology transfer. Fits right in with the name of our committee. Michael also presented the strategic goals for our economic development efforts. These goals include, number one, raising the profile and commitment to economic development as a priority for the UW system. Number two, working to build stronger connections to link university research activities with established businesses and also with entrepreneurs. And three, to find and sustain new means of funding, which is going to be quite a challenge. Dave Bruchart followed Michael Morgan and outlined our principles for how the Office of Economic Development intends to operate to achieve the goals that Michael described. He said the success of any new economic development programs will depend in part on how well those programs meet the differing needs of both the university and also the business entities. With regard to the timing and rollout of the economic development initiatives, Dave highlighted action items that offer what he said would be logical starting points. One of these is the proposed launch of a one-stop UW system web portal that will help us connect with businesses and also will help businesses connect with us to build this stronger connection. I should point out that while everybody at our committee meeting, including WEDC representatives and business owners, thought that this portal would be a good idea, there's no budget allocation for this portal. And as everybody on any campus knows or any business knows, you can put together a web portal. The challenge is to keep it up to date, and something like this would need daily monitoring in order to be effective. So there's a cost item there, there's a staffing item there. So everybody thought it was a great idea, but it is not anything that we have resources for at this point. We were honored to have as our special guest Paul Jaden, the Secretary of the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. Paul gave some emphasis and encouraged the READY Committee, and I think he was talking about the entire UW system, to move ahead with a sense of urgency to pursue the goals and objectives that Michael Morgan outlined. He reminded us that the WEDC's collaboration with the UW system ties directly into the economic development needs of the state. And he said WEDC's intention is to work with all parties to identify best practice models that will work efficiently and effectively. We then had a panel discussion of local entrepreneurs, or regional entrepreneurs, I should say. Randy Hulke, manager of the UW-Stout Discovery Center, moderated a panel discussion of these entrepreneurs. These were people from Johnson Electric Coil of Anago, White Winter Winery of Iron River, Shape Products of Menominee, and BTL Food Group of Eau Claire. Here are some takeaways from that panel discussion. Number one, to be successful as we build our economic development strategy, we will have to recognize and respect regional interests and expectations and differences. There's a lot of activity going on throughout the state. Different regions have evolved at different paces and have different partners that they have already established. So it's not like the UW system is coming brand new to this whole effort of economic development. There's a lot going on, even at the city and the town level and the county levels and regional levels. So we need to be respectful of that and come in as an assist and not come in as the be-all and end-all solution. Number two, we're going to have to be collaborative and inclusive with our partners, inside and outside the university system. Number three, one size does not fit all in this economic development area. And I would add a fourth item that didn't come from the business panelists, but I think as we move ahead with enthusiasm, we have to recognize that even within the UW system, there are legitimate concerns related to uncertainties about funding and how this kind of activity could impair the use of funds in other areas. There's certainly lack of faculty time. We've been able to accomplish a great deal around the state in this area, and a lot of it is donated time. It's volunteer time, and if we're really going to continue here and ramp up to do the best job we can for the state, we have to have funding to be able to provide support for these faculty members and academic staff who are interested and qualified to do this kind of work. And another thing we have to recognize, as I suggested a moment ago, is that different campuses have evolved at different paces in technology transfer and regional economic development work, although they're all involved. Now, that said, I think that there are areas where we can make early and very important progress, such as this asset mapping project that is under discussion with WEDC to identify our faculty expertise by industry category, and the prospect for developing this one-stop business web portal in collaboration with WEDC. Looking ahead, Dave Bruchart will continue conversations that will lead to an economic development plan that aligns with the mission and vision that Michael Morgan described. Over the next several weeks, David will be working with chancellors and provosts and others to identify strategies that they collectively agree are the right ones to pursue. as we move forward, I think that it will continue to be important that we align with our partners at WEDC and across the state, and also work to have broad campus and business community buy-in. And in doing that, our goal is to sustain and expand our economic development opportunities for our faculty and staff who are interested, and those who want to do more and those who want to get involved in the first place. This is going to require recognizing them with funding, and in some cases, where it's appropriate, I hope also recognizing them in their academic departments for this kind of work. So that concludes my report.
Thank you, Regent Bradley. Any questions for Mark? Mark.
I'd just like to make a comment that I was really excited about the presentation, because I think it highlights where I think economic development in Wisconsin really needs to focus, and that's on growing what's here, not necessarily on recruiting somebody to come in and get your picture in the groundbreaking, but actually growing what's here. And I think that the real value long term in this is companies appreciate those who help them be successful, and I think that one of the things we can't miss long term is the connection between helping companies develop and the links to the support for foundations and the support for the institutions in the future. And I think that's something that we need to be aware of and make sure that we make that link in the future.
Thank you. All right, we'll turn to Business, Finance, and Audit, and Regent Whitburn.
The committee received an excellent presentation yesterday afternoon led by Stout's Director of Business and Finance Services, Kim Schulte-Schulberg, on the university's document management initiatives with imaging and electronic workflow. We're experiencing some important efficiencies and process improvements through this initiative. I think the chancellors who may not be satisfied with what's going on their respective campuses in and around this imaging direction might check in with the people at Stout, because we were very impressed with what we learned about. The committee approved UW-Madison's contractual agreement with Novartis Pharmaceutical Corporation to do clinical trials over the next 2 years. It's about a $2.7 million agreement. We happily accepted $2.3 million in new bequests to the UW Trust Funds and received an annual update on the proxy voting season results. We also reviewed and approved, I think you would consider them routine changes to region policy documents related to corporate governance and social responsibilities. In a very important matter that will involve the full board before long, Al Christ updated the committee on progress that's been made in the development of the 2 new personnel systems that were legislatively called for through the work of the legislature last year, one for, of course, UW-Madison, the other for the rest of the system. You'll recall they're due for implementation system-wide and campus-wide in Madison, respectively, on July 1st of this next year. The full board will be looking at final recommendations on this important project in December. Elizabeth Dion reported on proposed strengthening of audit report structures that the committee embraced. Senior Vice President Mike Morgan reported that since our last meeting, the UW System Administration staff, working with DOA staff, have adjusted our unavoidable cost to continued budget lines down about $21.2 million. We will not need to ask for a delay in further budget submissions in this biennial budget process. Meanwhile, debt service funding in the budget proposal remains pending and will be added later by DOA. Mr. Morgan also updated the committee on progress that's been made in implementing recommendations of the report on reporting crimes against children and the implementation of Executive Order 54. Finally, as you know, the legislation was enacted last year requiring the university withdraw from WISNet. The committee received updates on the upcoming procurement of an alternate vendor for these critical services. So, consistent with the work of the committee yesterday, I would move approval of resolutions 1-2A2, D2, 3, D3-1, D3-2, and D3-3.
Second.
Any discussion on any of those motions, or anyone pull any of those out? Sorry. Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Anything else, Jerry? Okay. Capital Planning, Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. President. The Capital Planning Committee began its meeting yesterday with a presentation by Stout Vice Chancellor Phil Lyons about the campus's residence hall renewal plan, and there was a PowerPoint that I thought was very effective. I don't know who does your PowerPoint, but it was fantastic. These are the renewal plans for the res halls on this campus, strategies used to address various deficiencies in its current buildings. And as we heard at the last meeting, at a presentation by Maura Donnelly of system staff, about 80%, this is startling, 80% of our residence halls around the system were built in about the 60s. 80% of those res halls were built in the 60s, which means, of course, that they are coming up, all of them, on the need to either replace them or refurbish them. And one of our tenets of capital planning is to use as much as possible existing facilities. So what we're doing now, and what Stout is doing, is looking at all of these facilities, looking at the ADA compliance issues. Usually we need to add an elevator, looking at sprinkler systems, new finishes, revising the bathrooms, because students want more privacy in the bathrooms than the old designs allowed. There are all kinds of things that students want now that the old dorms didn't provide, and so this is a process that is going on throughout the system, and Stout is beginning a strategically phased approach to renovate its res halls over, I think, between 20 and 30 years, taking them out of service one at a time or two at a time in order to minimize the impact of the cost to the students. So it was a very interesting discussion, and we wish Stout good luck over the next 20 to 30 years in doing that. We took up a number of resolutions. The following 7 resolutions I'll present as a consent agenda item. They are listed in the report of the committee, which you have before you. And if anyone has questions or wants to address them individually, I'd be happy to do so. 1.3C was brought by UW colleges relating to the release of a parcel of land that is currently leased by UW Barron County and release that little parcel back to Barron County so it can be sold. It isn't needed by the campus. Resolution 1.3D, brought by UW-Milwaukee, authorized the demolition of the Kunkel Center building, which we all know it's strategically located right in the campus. It's time to demolish that building and prepare for some construction that's coming along at the northwest quadrant. Resolution 1.3E is brought by Platteville. It is a design report for the Dobson and Melker Residence Hall renovation project. Again, updating 60s constructed residence halls. Resolution 1.3F by Whitewater increased the scope and budget of Carlson Hall renovation project. Resolution 1.3G, brought by Whitewater, to increase the budget of the Fisher and Wellers Halls renovation project. and Resolution 1.3H, which is a system proposal. It was the physical planning principles to be used and applied in the 2013-19 long-range physical development plan, which I'll mention here in more detail in a moment. And Resolution 1.3I, which is a modification to our biennial capital budget, our 2013-15 capital budget, has two elements to it: a UW-Milwaukee element, which is remodeling of some space in the northwest quadrant for student health services, and a UW-Oshkosh element relating to an intramural recreation field complex, an inflatable dome that we had a long discussion on yesterday. The committee approved all of these resolutions, and I'll present them as a consent agenda item. Move their approval.
Anybody want to take any of these out? All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
We then took up Resolution 1.3J, which I separated because it was a very interesting proposal. Some of you know a lot about it. Some of you may not know anything about it. But those who are in and about Eau Claire know a lot about it. We all received, I think, some letters, and some of us got phone calls on this subject. It is the Confluence Project, a public-private partnership in Eau Claire, a very interesting project. You have in your materials the PowerPoint presentation that we received, the committee received yesterday. It is a combination of a shared university and community arts facility and an off-campus apartment-style student residence hall to be located right in the heart of the city of Eau Claire at the South Barstow Historic Riverfront District. It is a unique location, and it is a unique concept. The partners involved in this include various entities in the city of Eau Claire, as well as the city and county and UW-Eau Claire. They will all be working together to put this project in place. Because it does involve so many moving parts, it is a very complicated thing. We were reminded by Mr. Miller that we've had a number of very complicated partnership projects like this in the past, one of which, of course, was University Square on the Madison campus, where we had private participation as well as university. And this kind of project raises questions about who's going to be responsible for what, who's going to operate what, who's going to have liability for what, who's going to have continuing costs for what, and who's going to be held harmless for what. And all of this has to be worked out very carefully. This project is in the somewhat early stages, although they're moving as fast as they can, and we all of the partners are moving toward each other, but they don't want to commit until they have everybody else moving in the same direction. So the city of Eau Claire has adopted a resolution which sets forth a number of things that they feel are necessary, and that is what that we are doing with this resolution. If you read it carefully, and you'll see a revised version of it in your materials, you'll see that basically what we're saying is we approve this project in concept. It is a great concept. I love it because it is a partnership. We are cooperating with these units of government and private developers, and I also love it because it adds provides an arts facility that is shared between the community and the university to replace on both sides, both on the community and the university, very old and ineffective arts facilities. So Eau Claire is known for its arts program, and as you may know, it has a number of nationally and internationally known artists who have graduated from UW-Eau Claire. As I pointed out in the meeting yesterday, they've done pretty well with outdated facilities, but they said they'll do even better with new facilities, and this will provide that. So what you'll see here is a list of, you'll see a resolution approving the concept of the Confluence Center or project. You'll see a list of items that we have been able to identify as necessary to address before we can really move forward, including who will own and operate and what financial wherewithal they will have and support they will have to be able to meet their financial and operational obligations. We have some hold harmless language. We have the requirement that the public component of this project be directly and proportionally related to the state investment. We have to be able to determine that we're getting what the state is investing in the project, and it has to be developed in accordance with our state procedures. And we've also put a cap on the cost of the state investment in the arts facility portion of at $25 million, which is what we are at this very early stage estimating that our state investment would be. There is also, by the way, we expect a $30 million cost to the student residence portion of this, but that isn't part of this resolution. So what we're saying here is that upon satisfaction of these guiding principles, which we are describing them, and upon further recommendation of the Chancellor and the System President, the Board of Regents will consider seeking enumeration of the state portion of this project as an amendment to the 13-15 capital budget for funding in the biennium following that, or in subsequent capital budgets, depending on when all of these items are satisfied. We'd like to move it forward as fast as we can. We'll make every effort to get it into the 13-15 capital budget as an amendment, but there are a lot of things that have to fall into place before that can happen. So with that, I will move 1.3.J.
I'll second that.
And I'd be happy to answer questions or have a discussion on it.
So at our last meeting, we approved a capital planning budget of about $400 million of the expected $500 million or $538 million anticipated biennial capital program. Is this a potential $55 million add-on?
I believe those numbers are accurate. They're not accurate. David will tell us what this is.
The capital budget that was approved by the Regents in August was $400 million of general fund supported borrowing for 2013-15, an additional $369 million in program revenue supported borrowing in the same biennia. The $25 million and the $30 million for this project would be requested in 13-15 for release of funding and enumeration in 15-17. Both projects would proceed through a model that we've used in almost all public-private partnerships, which is a lease first and purchase upon completion. So the funding would be in 15-17. In which we've also requested advance enumeration of $169 million of general fund supported borrowing already for 15-17. This would be in priority order behind that, making that just under $200 million advance enumerated for 2015-17.
So none of it would be added to 13-15?
That is correct, sir.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, so we had the motion, second.
I think
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And Regent Bradley abstains.
Yes.
Okay.
One last
ahead.
item that I
Yeah,
want
yeah.
to mention, and that is that committee members were given yesterday, and the other committee members should have with your materials today a copy of the capital planning and budget physical development plan for 6 years, the 2013 through 19 biennia. And I just wanted to point this out because it is a very helpful guide. And if I'd been able to look at it quickly, I would have answered Jerry's question more accurately. What you'll see in here, and if you take a look at the introduction and table of contents, you'll see a description of the biennial budget request, major projects list, project request summaries, and then you'll see an interesting background of UW system profile, mission statements, our physical development principles. One of that item was on our agenda, and I mentioned it to you. The description of the physical development principles that are bound into this book is the draft that preceded our actions yesterday. So there'll be a new description of those physical development principles that will be in this book. The institution location map, there are institution profiles, there are nice pictures of or drawings, concept drawings of some of the things, and you can kind of get an idea by taking a look at these pages what's coming along. It's very helpful to anticipate what capital projects are coming. You all know that the capital planning and budgeting for UW system is a substantial part of the capital planning and budgeting for the whole state of Wisconsin. We take up 75% or something, 70% of the building that the state does throughout the state on all agencies. So this is a very important document, and I urge you to take a look at it. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Jeff. We'll turn to the Education Committee. Jose?
Thank you very much, President Smith. As been highlighted in a couple of other reports, included in your packet is also the Education Committee report summary, so you can receive more detail there. Before I get to the action items, I'd like to just highlight a couple of presentations that were given at yesterday's Education Committee report. The first one was UW-Stout's presentation on advancing STEM education. Provost Mary Hopkins Best was the person leading that presentation, and we also had an opportunity to hear from some students. It's really very good to have the opportunity to hear about some innovative things that are happening at different campuses, and this clearly was another example of some innovation that's happening throughout the system. We really also were given a very good example of Stout's Polytechnic mission in action, and I think it was just a very, very informative presentation. The second item that we had that led into some very good discussion was a presentation, or an update, I should say, and the first of more to come in the near future, updates on the flexible degree program. And one of the things that was clearly highlighted in Provost Aaron Brower's discussion with us was that this is a complex issue. It's a complex model that's being developed, that really there is tremendous amount of high expectation in many fronts, and that it is in some regards leading us into some uncharted territory, as he ably mentioned. We had some very good discussion about it, and the committee also did indicate that we have, and I think we were also speaking on behalf of the Board of Regents, that we have a strong interest in seeing this initiative move forward expeditiously. And we are pleased that we will be hearing regular updates on the Flex Degree program at subsequent meetings. I also want to note that Rebecca Karoff, who was our staff person for the Education Committee is going to be leaving us to move on to work with Erin on this very important new initiative, and we wish her well on that new career path that she's taking at this moment. With that, I would like to move now to the consent agenda items. The Education Committee unanimously approved the minutes of the August 23rd, 2012 meeting. Along with that, we also approved 3 resolutions, which I will now move for adoption. Resolution 1.1.A, approving the reappointments of Greg Nitch, Dr. Philip Farrell, and Dr. Patrick Remington to the UW School of Medicine and Public Health Oversight and Advisory Committee of the Wisconsin Partnership Program for 4-year terms beginning November 1, 2012 through October 31, 2016. We also moved Resolution 1.1A, Parent 3, authorizing implementation of the Bachelor of Science at UW River Falls, and also Resolution 1.1A, Parent 4, authorizing implementation of the Professional Science Masters of Industrial and Applied Mathematics at UW-Stout. So those I move as part of our consent agenda.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes.
And that concludes my with that concludes my report.
We have a new model here.
Oh, we don't need a president.
Which one?
Which one?
Okay. Tony.
We were rudderless here for a few minutes. It's kind of frightening. And first of all, before I begin the whereases, I want to personally thank UW-Stout and Chancellor Sorensen for their active outreach and collaboration with area school districts. I know from talking to school districts around this area, they're very thankful for that. So with the whereases, I propose this. Whereas the Board of Regents is pleased to have its October 2012 meeting at the University of Wisconsin-Stout, Wisconsin's Polytechnic University. And whereas the board focused on Thursday morning on the innovation and progress that has transpired at UW-Stout during Chancellor Sorensen's tenure by way of his presentation, Transforming a University, 25 Years of Moving UW-Stout Forward. And whereas board members had opportunities to learn about the value that UW-Stout contributes to the economy through the skills of its graduates that they bring to business, industry, and the university operations. And whereas, excuse me, the board is impressed by the accomplishment of UW-Stout's integrated planning process, having learned how the process works, the keys to success, challenges, and goals for the future. And whereas the board's committee members have learned about innovations in STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, opportunities to improve university business processes through efficiencies of electronic workflow, and a long-term effect to revitalize campus housing via the University Residence Hall Renewal Plan. And whereas the Research, Economic Development, and Innovation Committee heard from a group of business and industry leaders about the many ways that UW-Stout has helped our companies become more efficient and competitive, be it therefore resolved that the Board of Regents hereby extends its sincere appreciation to the University of Wisconsin-Stout for the generous hospitality extended by Chancellor Sorensen and the entire university community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It was a pleasure to host you. My staff enjoyed it so much they want to do it twice a year. So anytime I can come back. But thank you very much for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck, for a great 2 days. Are there any communications, petitions, or memorials? Okay, well, we'll take about a 10-minute recess and return to consider a motion to go into closed session.